Alright, welcome back everyone. My name is Pratesh here with Kaizen Crypto, bringing you another video. So I hope you guys are all doing well. Thanks so much for joining me here today. In this video, I wanted to talk about building a budget Cardano stake pool. So with Shelley pretty much already here, and we are going to see staking live on mainnet in August, lots of things happening with the Cardano project. I'm going to be running a stake pool on the mainnet using a bare metal server. So in my previous video talking about building a PC to run as a stake pool, I used components that were a little bit more expensive, maybe not so much so that you needed to spend a whole lot of money on. Now, in the instance that you are using those components, I think it's going to be just fine. You're going to find that those components should last you a really long time. But for those of you who are balling on a budget, this is going to be for you. We're going to be talking about building a Cardano stake pool for less than $400. Alright you guys, so to get things started, if you all do find some value from this video here today, please be sure to drop a like for me. If you guys are new to the channel and if you enjoy content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with Cardano content like this. If you guys do have any comments or suggestions for future videos, let me know down in the comments section below. So as far as the components that I used for this build, everything that I've sourced is going to be online. If you are going to be purchasing these components, I would recommend that you go with a reputable company that you would purchase from. The reason for me saying that is because if you do have an issue with one of these components not working, like for me in my instance, working with Amazon is great because you have free 2-day Prime shipping as well as excellent customer support. If one of these components is dead on arrival and you need to replace it, they'll be able to take care of you. So make sure you're keeping that in mind with whatever company you decide to purchase these parts from. If you guys do want to use the same parts that I'm using to put this build together, be sure to check out the links down in the description so that way you can see what exactly I used to get this thing built. So in this video, we're going to go through that entire process. I'm going to share with you guys my thoughts as we put it all together, and hopefully at the end of it, we have a working PC to run as a Cardano stake pool. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay guys, so we are here at the desk, and laid out for you I've got the hardware components that we're going to be using to put this build together. So I first just would like to say thank you to Cardano Guru, who put together a budget component list and was able to share that on social media. So I just wanted to say thank you to you, man. I used some of the components that you had in your list, and I just wanted to share with you what I did with my specific build. Some of these components are a little bit different from that list. If you guys are interested in purchasing any of these components for your own stake pool, make sure you check out the links down in the description below so you can see exactly what I used to put this together. As far as the motherboard, we're taking a look at the ASRock A320M HDV. This is going to be compatible with your AMD Ryzen series processor. In this instance, it's also compatible with the AMD Athlon. As far as keeping the price point as low as possible, because we are doing a budget PC build, I went with the AMD Athlon processor in this instance. I like how this processor comes with the built-in Radeon Vega graphics. Another big plus to keep that price point low. With the built-in graphics, we don't have to worry about a graphics processor. Now with this particular CPU, it's running 2 cores, 4 threads, and it's going to run about 3.5 gigahertz. So I think the processor, the motherboard, really inexpensive for both of these components. Try to keep the cost as low as possible. I did spend a little bit more money on the storage, however. I went with a solid state drive as opposed to a standard SATA drive. And the reason is because when you're doing this build, as far as loading up into the operating system, downloading your files and whatnot, I think the experience with having a solid state drive is just so much better. You can go with a SATA drive, it's completely up to you. In this instance, I feel like I wouldn't mind spending a little bit extra money for that solid state drive. I went with a Samsung 970 EVO Plus NVMe M2 SSD. This is a 250 gigabyte version. You can definitely get away with more if your budget is able to allow for that. But in this instance, for putting this together, I think 250 gigabytes should be just fine. As far as the memory, I went with the Corsair Vengeance LPX. This is a DDR4 RAM. I've got 2 8GB sticks of memory, so we're going to be running 16 gigs of RAM. This came very highly rated from Amazon. That's another nice thing I like about being able to shop online, is you can see the reviews and you can get feedback from people who have actually used these components already. So that's that. And then as far as the CPU cooler, the AMD Athlon processor does come with its own CPU cooler. Mixed reviews about what people think about that. So I went with this right here, $20, pretty inexpensive. This is the Alpine 64 Pro CPU cooler. It's got a 6-year warranty. This came very highly rated as well. So I figured I'd slap that on there, just give it that extra performance boost as well as the extra cooling. And then what we've got here, so this is the power supply. It's the Corsair CV450. Because we're running this as a server, there's not really a whole lot of power requirements. We're not doing any type of gaming. We're not doing any type of video editing per se. 450 watts of power. It's going to be plenty for what we're trying to do is running it as a server. This came rated with the 80+ bronze rating. Corsair is a very reputable brand when it comes to power supplies, and the reviews were also pretty decent on Amazon. As far as the case, I'm not sure if you guys can see that with the camera angle, but I wanted to do something different. So I went with a tempered glass case. This is going to be the Thermaltake Versa. This is a case that I found on Amazon, maybe spent about $50 to $60 on it, so really tried to keep the price point down there as well. So that's pretty much it as far as the hardware components. So now comes the fun part. Let's go ahead and put it all together. Okay, so we're ready to put everything together. I went ahead and took all the components out of the packaging just so that way it's ready to go as we put this build together. I've got the motherboard laid up top here on the box, and there's a padding material just underneath it just so that way it's protected. I went ahead and made sure I've got my electrostatic wrist strap attached to the case. I just want to make sure that we're grounded when we're touching these electronic components. If you guys did watch my second build, you guys know I had a little bit of an issue there. I'm not sure if it was because I shorted a component, or I'm not sure what happened exactly, but we're taking all the precautions necessary in this instance. So I've got that, and I think we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First thing I want to go ahead and do, really is the easiest thing we can, is go ahead and mount the SSD. So the SSD I have is the Samsung 970 EVO Plus. This is an NVMe M2 SSD. This is it right here. So this is the solid state drive. I'm not sure if the camera is able to focus in on that. But yeah, basically it's a little drive that's going to connect to the motherboard, and you'll be able to see where it says Ultra M2 on the actual motherboard. That's where we're going to be connecting it. So in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and line this up here. Just go ahead and push that in. Just want to make sure you're gently pushing that in. Don't force it. And you should hear it snap into place. The motherboard does come with a tiny little screw here. This is what we're going to use to go ahead and mount it. I'm just going to take this out. And I've got some tools ready. Only tools really that I think you would need right off the bat is definitely just some type of Phillips head screwdriver. I think should be okay with just that. And there's a little mount right here. I'm just going to screw that in. I'm not going to lie, I feel like having done a video before on putting a PC together, I feel like this is going to go a little bit better. So I would really appreciate your guys' feedback. Let me know what I can do to improve this type of layout. It's kind of fun to build PCs and put it on camera, so if you guys do, please be sure to let me know what you guys think. Just go ahead and leave some feedback for me. I'd really appreciate it. So now we've got the M2 SSD mounted. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Let me see if I can tilt this up for you. So it's right here. We've got the Ultra M2 connector. We just went ahead and mounted our SSD. Very easy to do that. It's probably the easiest thing to mount. So now that that's completed, let's go ahead and take a look at the memory. So I've got the RAM sticks here. This is the Corsair Vengeance LPX. I'll go ahead and take that out of the packaging. Very simple. You know, as far as packaging goes, let me set this off to the side here. So what we're looking at, we've just got 2 RAM sticks and we've got our 2 RAM slots. So it makes things very easy. We've got 2 and we're just going to place them down in there. So what I like to look for when it's time to line up your RAM slots is this notch right here. So you want to line that up to how it's looking like on the motherboard. You could do it this way, but you'll notice that the notch is not going to line up correctly. So just pay attention to this notch when it comes to putting your RAM sticks in. I'm just going to make sure that these are bent back. Okay, and I'm not going to secure it just yet. I'm going to make sure I can do the same for the second one here. Okay, so we've got both of our RAM sticks in. Now we've got a little lever on the side. This is going to be what we're going to use to make sure that it's seated correctly. So what I like to do, actually we can do one at a time just so that way you can see a little better. I'm not sure if you're able to see it very well. I'm going to do my best to line up the camera. Essentially what you want to do is make sure that your notch is inside the groove here. So you want to line that up. Bear with me, this might take a little bit of trial and error. But once you've got that lined up, there you go, it fits in like so. And you just want to apply a gentle amount of pressure. And what you're trying to do is have that snap into place. That should click, you should hear it. Okay, so that's one down. I heard it click into place. You guys just want to make sure you pay attention for that. You don't have to use a whole lot of force to get it in there, but you do want to make sure you hear it click. And then we're going to do the same for the second one here. Just trying to line up that notch that's in the middle. Just apply a gentle amount of pressure. You'll hear it click on one side. That's in. We're going to do the same for this side here. Alright, and we heard that one click into place as well. Very cool. Okay, so guys, both of our RAM sticks are in. Those are in there. And next, let's go ahead and take a look at the CPU and the CPU cooler. So here we've got the AMD Athlon. I'm going to go ahead and take this guy out and see what we're looking at here. So it does come with its own CPU cooler. If you guys want to use that, it's no worries. I think it'll serve you just fine. So in the instance that you don't want to spend the extra money, you don't have to. This CPU cooler is what we're going to be using for this build. It was an extra $20. Hoping to see a notable difference with that CPU cooler. So I'm going to set this one that came with it off to the side. And here we've got the processor. So this right here, this is the AMD Athlon. Nothing fancy, just a basic CPU processor. Now as far as how we're going to line this up, so on the motherboard there is a square that's cut out specifically for the CPU. So that's going to be this guy right here. What I like to look for as far as being able to line up the CPU correctly, so there's a little notch right here, so it's on the right hand side, and that notch is going to correspond with a cutout on the CPU. You'll see a little notch on there as well. So as far as putting that in, there's a little bracket here. It's a metal bar. I'm just going to push that out and up, and you'll lift it up just like that. And then we'll go ahead and take the CPU out of the packaging here and look for that corresponding notch. I try to really not touch the top and the bottom of the CPU. So I like to handle it from the sides. I'm just going to tilt this upside down, and it comes out just like that. You guys can see that's the processor. I'm just handling it from the sides just so that way I can avoid any fingerprints on the pins and on the top. Alright, so as far as the notch, I'm not sure if you guys are able to see it. I'm going to try my best to line up the camera. So little notch right here, right in the corner. I'm not sure if you guys are able to see that very well, but it's right in the corner there. It's like a gold cutout. It's a gold notch. Guys, you have to forgive me. The camera doesn't seem to want to cooperate, but it's there. It's there. You just want to make sure you pay attention for it. So that gold notch is what we're going to use to line up the socket when we go ahead and place it into our motherboard. So I can see a little arrow that's pointing on our top right. That's going to be where we're lining up our CPU. Want to be very careful not to touch any pins. You just want to go ahead and inspect the CPU also to make sure that there are no bent pins. Once it's in, you'll hear it just fit snugly into place. No need to apply any pressure there, and what you do to secure it is you just push down the metal bar, and that's it. That's all there is to it. So our CPU has been installed. Let's go ahead and take a look now at the CPU cooler. So in order to go ahead and mount the CPU cooler, what we'll need to do first is go ahead and apply some thermal paste to our CPU. This is just so that way the heat is able to be conducted as it transfers up from the CPU over to this heatsink. So we'll have to take a look at that. I don't believe that this came with any thermal paste actually, so that's kind of surprising. Normally CPU thermal paste does come with the CPU coolers. However, in this instance it didn't come with that, so something I've noticed there. Luckily I do have some thermal paste laying around, so you'll just need to make sure you have some of that. This is very interesting actually. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the instructions. I'm not sure if you guys can see this here. This pad right here looks like it's already got some thermal paste ready to go. So it depends on the CPU cooler, I guess. What I'm going to do is go ahead and quickly take a look at the instructions and see if it's really necessary with this particular cooler. Alright, so guys, this is very interesting. I'm learning along with you all. So this is actually pre-applied thermal paste, so that's pretty nice. I guess that makes sense why it wouldn't come with its own separate tube of thermal paste. So this particular CPU cooler actually already has this ready to go, so that's pretty awesome. As far as how we're going to install this on our motherboard, I quickly took a look at the instructions. We've got these notches here, and these are actually going to line up with these brackets that are going to mount the CPU cooler. So as far as how this is going to look, let me see if I can line this up for you. Essentially we've got our connector. This is going to be our fan connector to mount to our motherboard. We'll be taking a look at these connections here in just a moment. And as far as how this is going to go, so we've got these two metal brackets here. Those are going to line up with our mount for our CPU cooler. So I'm going to gently go ahead and place this down. There really isn't a whole lot of additional hardware we need to worry about. It's got pre-installed thermal paste. So let's see how we can line this up here. Well, I've got it in on one side. It looks like the other side's a little bit more tricky. Let me see if I can flip this over so you guys can see it. This notch right here, this notch is what we're going to be using to line up this metal bracket. I'm really trying my best not to force it. It seems like it's stuck on that one side. I'm just trying to push this down a little bit to see if I can maybe give it a little bit of pressure there. But it doesn't seem to want to go in all the way. I'm going to see if I can go ahead and disconnect this one side and then just try it again. Let's try it. Okay, that took a little bit of force. That was quite a snug fit. But yeah, so we've got these brackets now connected to the CPU cooler mount, so we're all set there. The next thing for us to do is to go ahead and mount this. This is the connector for the fan. Now we're going to be taking a look at the motherboard so that way I can show you how exactly these connections should look. But essentially this is going to connect to, looks like it's got 3 prongs, and then there's a little clip that just sticks out. So that's it right here. I'll show you in just a moment what this exactly looks like, but I'm just going to connect that. Okay, and that's it. So guys, our CPU cooler is now installed. That's where we're at so far. So we're looking good. I think the next thing for us to do is go ahead and test our power supply. Make sure we're getting power. We'll go ahead and take a look at the connections for the case. Make sure that we can get everything like the power switch, the power LED, all that configured. And we should be good. So we're making progress here, guys. Let's go ahead and take a look at the power supply. Okay, so we're taking a look at the power supply. I've got it taken out of the packaging here. This is the Corsair CV450. With this, so it's non-modular, all these cables came pre-attached. Now, as far as a budget power supply, most likely that's what you're going to find. If you do want something that is modular or semi-modular, what you're going to be looking for is something that's probably a little bit more expensive, but with that, you're not going to have to worry about all these different cables. So just something to keep in mind when it comes time to purchase your power supply. Essentially what we want to do is just go ahead and test to make sure that everything is working. This will allow us to see before we place it inside of our case that we're pretty much good to go as far as all of our components working. Okay, so guys, I just wanted to spend some time to talk with you all about some of these cables that are attached to our power supply. So as far as what we're looking at, it is going to be dependent on what type of power supply that you have, whether it's fully modular or semi-modular. What that means is that you're able to add and remove cables. In this instance, because we went with our budget power supply, we don't necessarily have that option, but it's okay, it's all good. We'll just be able to do some more cable management to get rid of these excess cables. So what we have here, this is going to be our 24-pin cable. This is going to connect to our motherboard. So this is a more important cable. We'll definitely be needing that. This is it's an 8-pin connector. We'll have to connect that to our motherboard as well. And then these right here, these are some smaller cables. These are actually SATA cables for connecting a standard SATA hard drive. In our instance, we don't necessarily have to worry about that because we've got our M2 SSD connected. So in this instance, this is going to be pretty much unnecessary for us. If you do have a standard SATA drive, this is going to be what you're going to want to use. And then we have this here. This is going to be a 6 and 2. This is going to be if we did have some type of graphics processor. In our instance, not really necessary. We don't have to worry about that. That's pretty much it. So as far as what we're looking at here, it's just a matter of connecting this, connecting all this to the appropriate connections on our motherboard. So that's going to be the next step for us. And then we've also got our power cable. So this is going to connect to the power supply, and then we'll go ahead and plug this into our wall outlet. All right, so let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, so went ahead and tested the power supply. Everything is looking good. So there is power that's going to the power supply. I went ahead and installed it inside of our case. Again, guys, keep in mind, depending on what type of case that you get, things are going to look a little bit different. The concept is still very much the same though. What you have are 4 screws on the back. So what I did here was I went ahead and tried to line up the power supply. Let's see if I can tilt this around so you guys can see it. So the power supply right here, we've got 4 screws that are able to mount the power supply into our case. So now that that has been completed, we need to go ahead and seat our motherboard into our PC case. So what I'm going to do is quickly go ahead and flip this around, and we'll be able to drop this inside there. Alright, so I've got the case opened up and we're ready to go ahead and put our motherboard inside. One thing to note, depending on the type of case that you do go with, you're going to have these standoffs here at the very bottom. So in this instance, the case that I'm working with here, the standoffs have already been connected, so it comes pre-installed to the case. Something to keep in mind though, if your case does not have that, you will need to go ahead and install those standoffs so that there is a way to connect your motherboard to the case. In this instance, we're good to go. So what I need to do is first go ahead and move this cable out of the way. This is for the fan. This is the fan that's on the CPU case, and then the next thing we have is this I/O shield. So this I/O shield is going to go on the back, and it's basically going to be a little protector so that there's no dust or anything like that coming in from that big gap. So I'm just going to go ahead and line that up here really quick. So let's go ahead and reach over here. I've got the motherboard ready to go. So what we have to do now is just go ahead and line it up as best we can. So easiest way to hold this is going to be probably with the CPU cooler. Let me see if I can actually get a better grip on this. Okay, here we go. So really nice compact. I like that. This will just stay on there. And we just want to inspect. What I'm doing right now is checking to make sure that there's nothing that needs really any attention. You know, there's no bent pins, there's no blown capacitors. Really just making sure that everything is looking good. Right now I think everything is okay. So what I'm going to do, see, I can turn this CPU so that the connectors are able to fit out of the I/O shield. So that's how it's going to line up. Now we're just going to do our best to gently place that down in there. What you want to do is see if you can line up not only the connections for the I/O shield, but also pay attention to the standoffs at the bottom of the case, making sure that the holes on the motherboard are lined up with those standoffs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It looks like I might have to do a little bit of fidgeting with this. And once we're done with that, we need to just go ahead and mount our motherboard. Okay, so it looks like I've lined up the motherboard so that the standoffs at the bottom of the case are lined up with the holes on the motherboard, as well as the inputs on the motherboard sticking out correctly from the I/O shield. So in order to mount our motherboard to the case, we've got some hardware that's been supplied for us. Essentially what we're looking at here, this is going to be used for an SSD if we have an external SSD. We're not going to be needing this because we've already got our M2 mounted. This right here is going to be for a hard drive, so if you've got your standard SATA hard drive, you're going to need the hardware that's provided here. So what's remaining, this is going to be what we'll use to go ahead and connect our motherboard to our PC case. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. We've got a few different holes here that are connected with the standoffs that are already installed on the case. So I'll quickly go ahead and line those up and we should be good.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you guys are finding some value from this video, please be sure to drop a like for me. It definitely does help out the channel. If you're interested in staking Cardano, please consider Kaizen Stake Pool. I really appreciate your support.
Alright, now what we're looking at here, so I've got the motherboard mounted. We used the hardware that was provided to go ahead and secure that to our CPU case. I did a bit of cable management also, just tried to do my best to feed these wires from both the PC case as well as the power supply up through the slots here on the case, so that way it's a little bit easier for us to work with. There are some things in this specific build that we're not going to have to worry about. It's namely going to be the SATA cables for our hard drive. Because we're using a M2 SSD, we don't really have to worry about that. If you are going to be using a standard SATA hard drive though, just keep in mind that a lot of times you'll have SATA cables provided with your motherboard. So just something to keep in mind. In this instance though, I just want to briefly kind of go over some of the different cables that we're looking at. I know when you first get started with it, it can be a bit overwhelming. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the cables and where they're going to be going. In this instance, so we were talking about earlier when we looked at the power supply, we've got this big 24-pin cable. That's going to be what connects to our motherboard here from our power supply. Got a whole bunch of different cables here. It's actually, some of them are labeled. So like, see, this one is for CPU. One thing to keep in mind is that you're going to have two power cables that are going into your motherboard. So in this instance, we've got the 24-pin, and then I've got another one that's over here on this side. So I might have to go ahead and feed this cable through this other end here. But those are going to be some things that we're looking for. This one's actually got 8 pins. Now, because we've only got a 4-pin connector there, I'm just going to need to connect 4 of these, so it'll break off into like 2 equal sections. So that's something to consider. What we're looking at here, I've got a PCIe cable. I don't really need to worry about that. We don't really have any peripherals that would need that. Another thing that we have here, so as far as what we're looking at from the case, we've got a few of these small cables. Essentially, these are going to be things like, we can see here it says power switch. We've got the hard drive LED. We've got the reset switch. This is going to be the LED on the front of the case. We've also got our audio, so this is HD audio. Got a couple of those. So yeah, there's a couple things to look at here. I'm going to do my best to show you what that looks like and trying to connect it to our motherboard. And then as far as the fan, we've got the fan that's mounted here on the case. We've got a cable that looks very similar to what we saw with the CPU fan. This is going to connect to the same type of connection. It's just going to be in a different location on the motherboard. So let's go ahead and get started. What I want to do first is go ahead and connect all these tiny cables. These are all like peripherals, so you got your power switch, your power LED. I'm going to quickly go ahead and do that. You might have to refer to your owner's manual for your motherboard. All of these types of connections are going to be different, so you want to make sure that you're referring to that if you need to. But essentially what you're looking at here, I'm going to try my best to line it up in the camera. We've got this indicator that shows that it's for the power switch. You'll be able to see that on your motherboard. In my instance, it's going to be very close to where the SATA connectors are. And as far as how you want to line it up, so I'm going to try and see if you guys can get that into focus. Here, let me see here. It's going to be kind of hard to tell with the camera, so I apologize about that. You guys just have to bear with me. there is an arrow on one of these little connectors. Now this arrow is going to indicate a positive terminal. So you have positive and negative, and you'll be able to see that on your motherboard and how it's supposed to line up. The arrow is going to go where the positive terminal goes. So that's just a quick tip. It's a little bit tricky, so take your time with it. And that's pretty much what we're looking at with these different cables. I'm going to quickly do that. Oh, let me show you this as well. This is going to be for our USB. And guys, you'll see the labels here. You'll see the labels on the motherboard. You just want to take your time. Make sure that you're lining up all these cables correctly. Don't force anything when you do connect it. So I'm going to quickly do that, and I'll be with you guys in just a moment. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys where we're at so far. I've went ahead and connected all the cables to their respective connections on the motherboard. I've got the motherboard mounted inside of the case, and we've got the power supply mounted. So the next thing for us to do is just to test, make sure everything is working. What I'm going to do is join you guys downstairs at the office. We're going to connect this to power and see if we get anything. In the instance that we do, we should see the option to go ahead and install our operating system. So there will be a future video regarding that and showing you guys how to do so. But if we don't, then we'll have to go through the process of some more troubleshooting. So just wanted to let you guys know this is where we're at currently. I'm going to see if I can swoop inside the case here, maybe give you guys a better angle of what it might look like. So just trying to explain very briefly as we're taking a look here. We've got our 24-pin power connector. That's going to be this right here, this big guy. And then we've got right next to that on the left, this is going to be our USB cable. And right next to that is also another USB. We've got multiple USB ports here on this case, so we've got lots of options there. Next to that, all the way on the left-hand side, let me see if I can get this thing to focus here. There we go. So those pins right there, right on the very left corner there, those are going to be for, say, like the power switch. We've got the power LED. And like I was showing you guys before on how to line it up with the positive and negative terminal, just want to make sure that you pay attention to that. If we go up here, we can see that is our fan connector. So that's going to be our CPU fan. We've got that mounted. And then right there in the corner, guys, we're going in and out of focus, bear with me. So right there in the very left corner, that's going to be our HD audio. So now we've got that connected. That's going to be right in the very corner. Probably the hardest thing for me to actually manage to connect is going to be that cable right there, that CPU power cable. I'm not sure if you guys can see it there. I'll see if I can point to it. But this cable right here, that was pretty tricky. So you want to make sure, as far as your cable management, you're just paying attention to how the cables have to be connected to the motherboard. That's probably the biggest thing I could say about that. That was a little tricky, but we got it. And that's about it. So not too complicated. We managed to get everything fitting very snugly inside of this case. Just to show you guys some perspective, this is an absolutely massive case compared to the size of the motherboard we're using. So if you were going to be using something like this for gaming, you could totally do that. But in this case, we've got a micro ATX motherboard fitting inside this case, so things are looking good. Let's go ahead and connect this to our monitor and to our power, and fingers crossed, let's see if it works. Alright, so guys, we're down at the home office, and this is the moment of truth. So now it's a matter of turning this on, checking to make sure that it's working. So as far as what I've got here, we're taking a look at the current system that we're using. This is going to be the other PC that I did in my previous video. And this right here is going to be another PC where I'm going to be able to use it as an maybe offline instance if I needed a machine to store my keys and I didn't want to have that connected to the internet. So just trying to figure out, how exactly I can configure these to have the most optimal setup. Because one thing to consider if you are going to be running a stake pool is that you need to have at least 2 relays from what I've seen, and you're going to have 1 core node. So now in this instance, currently we're running on the Shelley testnet. We're going to be moving over to mainnet in about a month. So things are really moving pretty quickly. With this machine right here, right now on the testnet, I'm running 2 relays and 1 core on 1 machine. So that actually could work if we go over to mainnet. I could definitely see that happening. But I would want to have an offline machine to store my keys. So that gives me the ability to have that with this computer. So right now I'm just trying to figure out how I can configure this. If you guys do have any suggestions, go ahead and let me know down in the comments section. So first things first, I've got this connected now to power, and we've also got it connected to our monitor here. So what I'm going to do is head to the back. We're going to flip the switch at the back of the power supply to give power to all the components, and then we'll go ahead and press the power button, and fingers crossed, let's see what happens. One thing to look for, if your power supply does have a fan built in, when you turn the power supply switch on, you should see that fan start moving. Guys, it took a little bit figuring out here. I had to actually just unplug it really quick and then plug it back in. It looks like we have power, so that's awesome. We've got the CPU fan going, we've got the chassis fan going. Just checking up front here. Wow, this is really cool. This case is awesome. It's got a nice LED on the front. So it looks like we have power. This is really awesome to see. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the monitor to make sure that everything's working. In the instance that it is, we should see this boot up into our BIOS, or it could even be looking for a readable device to boot from. So let's check to see what happens here. Let's jump over to the monitor. Okay, so guys, this is exactly what we want to see. I know it might be kind of cut off on the camera. I'm going to do my best to show my face here so you guys can see what I'm saying. But it's saying on the computer, reboot and select proper boot device. So that is exactly what we need to see. That's really awesome. This was actually the first try to try and get this thing working. So really awesome. I'm excited about that. Essentially what we need to do now is load an operating system. So we've successfully got our computer working. It took a little bit of wiggling. I just had to unplug the cable and then plug it back in. I had to flip the power switch maybe on and off just a couple times, I guess because it's the first boot up, but everything seems to be working great. So CPU fan's working, we've got the chassis fan working just fine, we've got the LED that's in front looking really cool, that's working. And also what we want to check for on our monitor, I'm not sure if you're able to see it here because of the glare, but just to read what it says, it's saying reboot and select proper boot device. So that's exactly what we want to see. Essentially, the computer is looking for an operating system to boot from. So this is perfect. This was actually the first try that we got this working. So compared to the previous build, we've definitely had some luck with this one. So I hope you guys did find some value from this video here today. The next process for us is going to be to install an operating system onto this computer. In future videos, I'm going to be showing you all how to do this. I know it's been very requested to have a series of videos showing you guys how to set up a stake pool. I hope you guys are able to remain patient with me. As you all know, I'm currently in the process of building this out myself. So, definitely be patient with me. I'm really working hard to make sure I can produce high quality content that's informative for you guys. If you are interested in videos like that, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that way you can stay tuned and you're notified when it is that I go ahead and release those. As far as loading the operating system onto this computer, I actually have a bootable USB that's already got Ubuntu 20.04 LTS loaded. Alright you guys, that was a lot of fun. Thank you all so much for staying with me until the very end. Hopefully you guys did find some value from this video today, and maybe you've gained a better understanding now of what it would take to run a stake pool using a bare metal server. So as far as the next steps from here, we need to install an operating system onto our PC. Easiest way to do that is to take a bootable USB device, so you can use just a standard thumb drive, and we want to use a software called Banana Etcher to install a version of either Ubuntu, you can use Windows. For running a stake pool, I do recommend Linux operating system. So in my instance, I'm using Ubuntu version 20.04 LTS. LTS stands for long-term support. So over the course of the next 5 years, updates will continue to be made for this version. So that's what I'm going to be doing. As far as how to do that in a video format, stay tuned. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm going to keep you guys up to date with content related to how to do this in future videos. I really do appreciate all of your patience. It's been quite a journey to get to this point, and still in the process of building everything out myself. So for those of you who have been asking about how-to videos on setting up a stake pool from start to finish, I appreciate your patience. I really do. It's been a lot of work for me personally to get my own operation up and running. But rest assured, as soon as I am ready to get this thing out for you guys, I will be sure to let you all know. I appreciate all of you watching. Thank you all so much for the support. Hopefully you guys will be able to consider delegating to Kaizen Stake Pool when we are on mainnet. Anyway guys, thank you all so much for watching. I really do hope that you enjoyed it. Please be sure to drop a like for me before you go, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.